Welcome to the Word for Life podcast, a daily devotional covering the entire Bible from Genesis to Revelation.
Balaam was not able to curse Israel, but he knew how Israel could bring a curse on themselves. And he gave that idea to the king of Moab. And the king of Moab followed Balaam's advice. Numbers 31:16 tells us how the Moabites followed Balaam's advice and enticed the Israelites to be unfaithful to the Lord in the Peor incident, so that a plague struck the Lord's people. What was that advice Balaam gave? And how did the Moabites entice Israel? And how was Israel unfaithful to the Lord? That is found in this chapter in Numbers 25. Verses 1 to 3 says, While Israel was staying in Shittim, the men began to indulge in sexual immorality with Moabite women, who invited them to the sacrifices to their gods. The people ate the sacrificial meal and bowed down before these gods. So Israel yoked themselves to the Baal of Peor, and the Lord's anger burned against them. Friends, other nations like Moab thought that they needed to manipulate their gods so that they will bless them. For instance, they offered spectacular sacrifices to the gods so that they will in turn bless them. Moab taught this concept to Israel. You see, Israel also had sacrifices, but it was never to manipulate God or make him bless them. God, by his grace, already blessed Israel. All that believers needed to do was remain faithful to God and pray to him when they are in trouble or in need, and God takes good care of them. But the pagan nations thought of God as a corrupted one who needed to be bribed with sacrifices. So we read in verse 2 that Moab invited the Israelites to the sacrifices to their gods. The people, that is Israelites, ate the sacrificial meal and bowed down before these gods. Friends, what Israel forgot was that God had already blessed them. Even Balaam in the previous chapter confessed that those who bless Israel will be blessed, those who curse Israel will be cursed. God showed to Balaam how he will bless Israel with all kinds of prosperity in the future. God also told Balaam that Israel will also have a great future. A great ruler will come from them. God will simply do all these things because of his gracious promise to Abraham. But unfortunately, many Israelites now believed that Baal will bless them and went after Baal's blessings. Verse 1 also tells us that while Israel was staying in Shittim, the men began to indulge in sexual immorality with Moabite women. You see, these other nations like Moab had another despicable religious practice. They thought that when men have relationships with particular temple women, then the gods will bless them and their lands with fertility. This was called the fertility cult. This was an ugly religious practice among the other nations. Essentially, this was adultery. But the other nations thought of this as a religious act. And the Moabites introduced this religious practice also to the Israelites. And many Israelite men fell for this. As verse 3 tells us, so Israel yoked themselves to the Baal of Peor. Friends, God wanted Israel to honor marital relationships. But some of the Israelites were first attracted to the food that the Moabite women brought them. After they ate the food, then they engaged in idolatry. And then went into adultery. One led to another. You see, Israel went from bad to worse, and God had to send a plague in order to stop them. Verse 9 tells us that 24,000 died in the plague. Friends, we must remember here that Israel was actually moving closer to Canaan, and this was completely unnecessary. It's a tragedy that a people group whom Balaam could not even curse, even after so many attempts, had brought the curse on themselves. And so God had to intervene. You see, the Moabites who engaged in such unholy practices did not die, but Israelites died. That is because God wants His people to be holy, and He disciplines those He loves. In such a disastrous and tragic incident, one man by the name Phinehas did something to finally stop the plague. He went after a man who was with a Moabite woman and killed both of them. Then the plague stopped. Usually, an animal would be sacrificed to the Lord as a sin offering. Here, two people had to be killed for the plague to stop. This is very tragic because even the plague did not stop the Israelites from sinning. And finally, Phinehas had to use violent means to stop the Israelites. This chapter tells us that God appreciated Phinehas. Verse 11 tells us, Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, has turned my anger away from the Israelites, since he was as zealous for my honor among them as I am. I did not put an end to them in my zeal. To this Phinehas, the Lord promised this. Therefore tell him, I am making my covenant of peace with him. He and his descendants will have a covenant of a lasting priesthood, because he was zealous for the honor of his God and made atonement for the Israelites. Friends, God honored Phinehas and his family. To this day, he has become a symbol of standing tall for the Lord. Believers too can be zealous for God's honor like Phinehas. Believers know exactly what God requires of them, because God has explicitly stated His desires through His commandments in the Bible. But even today, there are many who do not care about it. Sometimes even fellow Christians despise God's laws. But true believers stand up for the truth and honor God. They do not succumb to pressure or their inner cravings, but openly choose to stand for God and please their God.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you tomorrow for the next episode of the Word for Life podcast.